welcome. You're listening to the Just Love Them podcast. I'm your host, Cherie Best. Join me on a journey to understand and find peace with those we love who have left their faith. As people share their experiences, their thoughts, and their takeaways, listen for what resonates for you and take from these episodes what will help you in your life and for your situation. Thank you, listeners, for rating and for reviewing this podcast. Today's special guest is Kristy Hunter, a proud mom of 3 amazing kids and wife to a dedicated junior high teacher. She's a vocal coach and concert keynote speaker with a unique talent for transforming personal trials into powerful messages of hope. Kristy leans on her deep faith in her Savior to navigate life's challenges, channeling her experiences into heartfelt songs that bring healing and resolution. Through her music and storytelling, she inspires others to find strength, build their faith, and keep moving forward, even when the road gets tough. Let's dive into Kristy's journey and hear how she uses her gifts to uplift and empower those around her. Welcome, Kristy.
Thank you so much for having me on, Cherie. I'm so excited to be here.
You are so welcome. I'm excited too. I would love for you to just go ahead and, like we said, dive in.
Well, I have been using music as what I would say my therapy, my whole life. I have been singing since the time I was little. I was in my first play at 5, and I've been writing songs in my closet, being a closet songwriter for as long as I can remember. But really the reason music has been such a big part of my healing process is because whenever my emotions were too big, and things that were going on were too hard for me to mentally handle, I would often turn to singing. And in those times, I often even sung my prayers because music was a way for me to communicate with my Savior and my Heavenly Father. I often, when I am writing songs, I feel more like I am just a vessel, and kind of there's a conduit that I'm downloading information straight from heaven. And this really helped me through many, many times in my life. I went through a period of time of infertility, 10 years of infertility that were really trying. And as you know, and people want to be a mom so badly and can't. And the emotions that are there, especially when we as Christians feel the very strong desire that parenting and motherhood is a huge part of our religion. It's a part of our belief system that we're supposed to multiply and replenish the earth. And so that period of time was really rough for me. And miracles happened that led me to my oldest son. And when he was actually 5 when we found him. I had been told 3 years earlier, actually 5 years earlier, when I was in the Peace Corps in Mongolia, I'd had a dream that I wasn't going to be able to have kids and that I was going to have to adopt. And I woke up from this dream and I told my husband, and I was like, I just had this dream. And he was like, it's just a dream. But at that point, we'd been married 5 years and I'd already had a couple miscarriages and I was about 25 at the time. And I told him, well, when I turn 29, if we haven't had any children, I want to look into adoption. And time went by. I had another miscarriage after the Peace Corps, and we got closer and closer to that 29th birthday. I brought it up again. I said, remember that dream I had? And he was very supportive, and we started looking into adoption. And crazily, we of course originally thought we would adopt a baby because that was just our original thing. And every time we went to the meetings for that, it just didn't feel right. Then all these miraculous things happened. And I met my little boy, Dylan, and he was 5 years old, and I met him the day before my 29th birthday.
Wow.
And the minute I saw him, I knew he was my son.
And how did you happen to see him? What was the situation?
So the situation was my sister was working with a woman in her ward who had MS. They had to go and actually move her joints because she couldn't move herself anymore. They'd locked up so much. And so they would have 2 women from the ward come every day to help her. And it just so happened on this day she was serving and another woman in her ward was serving, and we had recently told her that we were looking into adoption and looking into foster care. And while they were helping this woman, they got into a conversation, and her neighbor said, I have a nephew who needs a home. My sister called me, I was at work, and she calls me and she's like, Kristy, there's a little boy who needs a home. And it was very interesting. I felt a very strong spiritual sensation, and a voice said, be still and watch his miracles unfold.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And at the moment, I was the only person at the office. I was helping run a doctor's office, and I was the only one person there. I'm like, well, I can't leave. Like, I don't know what to do. And within 5 minutes, the doctor walked in, and I told them the situation, and they said, go. And I went to my sister's house, and I met this aunt, and she told me about Dylan's situation, and she showed me his picture, and I saw his picture, and I knew he was my son.
Wow.
Within a week, we had gone up and met him, and within 2 weeks, he was living with us. And there were so many miracles that fell into place to make that happen. I mean, it was uncanny. But I was his 5th mom. He'd been in 4 homes before me, all kin care, but he's still the longest place he'd been in one placement was 1.5 years. Something I didn't know because I hadn't actually been through the foster care classes. We ended up doing this as a private adoption. I really believed in that moment that the reason he walked away from his aunt's house without looking back and was like, took my hand, I was like, he knows that he's my son. Like, it was very powerful. But he actually had something called reactive attachment disorder, which I didn't know of and hadn't heard of. And so as he came to live with us, there were a lot of different issues that came up that we had to work through, and a lot of trials and a lot of emotional things. And it was a long process of figuring those things out. He was with us for 3 years, and he was in 3rd grade, and things were falling apart. He was in the principal's office all the time. He was in trouble at school all the time, and he was stealing stuff from neighbors' houses, and there was just all these things. And I would talk to people, and I'd be like, so he has these tantrums. And they'd be like, oh, well, kids have tantrums. I'm like, okay. Because I didn't want anyone to know I was a bad mom, right? I'd wanted to be a mom for so long, but I didn't know how to be a mom, right? And all of a sudden I have a 5-year-old. And then the day after that the adoption was final, I found out I was pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And so then I had my daughter. So within 1.5 years, I went from having no children to having an almost 7-year-old and a baby.
Wow.
And I'm trying to navigate this. I'm trying to figure it out. He would often tell me I wasn't his real mom and that I kidnapped him, and he was going to go to prison and find his parents, and I'm like, I'm really trying. And there were just all these emotions. He was in 3rd grade when I finally got called into, we'd moved to Eagle Mountain, and we had a new principal at the school, and she called me in, and we'd had some more problems, and I just lost it. I just started bawling and kind of went through everything that I'd been trying to do, and she's the one who asked me, she said, have you ever heard of reactive attachment disorder? And I said, no. And she was like, you really need to look into it. She'd had experience in the foster care system. I got a hold of his aunt, who said, oh, well, he went to a therapist when he was here. And they ended up having a book like this big of information that I finally got from that therapist. And he already had a diagnosis of ADHD and reactive attachment disorder, which I was not treating because I didn't know.
Yeah.
And when I researched and found out what reactive attachment disorder is, and that these children who don't attach to a single caregiver before the age of 3, they often don't know or know how to attach. And so they'll often reject their mother or their caregiver. They push them away. There's all these things. And in this, there was almost this loss because I wanted so bad. And I realized, like, maybe I'm never going to have that. I got on my knees in my closet and I wrote this song called Why Don't You Love Me? And because I wanted him to love me so bad. And the first verse went like this. Why don't you love me? Why can't you believe what I say? Why do our hearts feel frozen every day? As I look at you, I feel the chill within your eyes. Oh, how I want you to love me. I want to warm your heart each day, even when you push me away. I only want to hold you and say, everything will turn out okay. I wrote this song just out of it was just a prayer, out of my soul of, am I ever gonna be able to fit this? But after I wrote it, I acknowledged that hole that was there, and then I realized I'm gonna fix this. I can do this. And we started doing therapy, and we got on medications, and we started doing play therapy, and we got into all kinds of sports to help with his ADHD and get him involved in things. And we saw a lot of improvement, which was really, really great. And he was doing better in school. We had things in order for things that were happening at school for recess time and different things. We just had a lot more boundaries in place and things in place to really make sure that he could be successful. And I was like, yes, we're doing it, right? We're going through, we're making it to 6th grade. And then I had another miracle. I had another daughter.
Wow.
Which was, again, they told me I'd never have any more kids. And my little girl, Julianne, prayed for a sister for 3 years. And miraculously, I had my daughter. So now I have a 12-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a newborn. And just the God's timing, right? God's timing is interesting. Mm-hmm. So we're doing all of these things. I'm like, okay, it's gonna be okay. We're doing it. But when my son hit about 15, he hit a rough patch, and he started making some choices that he ended up getting arrested. And at that point, I was really mad because he'd been with us for 10 years now, and I'd done everything that I could. I was like, I've done everything. I've done everything you've asked me to do. And I remember going again to my closet because that was my safe place. And this time I was just like, God, why did you give him to me if he's just going to end up in jail like his parents? What was the point? And he said very clearly, I didn't give him to you to fix. I gave him to you to love. And that moment changed everything in my life, because I realized I no longer needed to focus on what was wrong or what needed to be fixed. I just needed to love this child exactly where he was. And it was at that time that the end of this song, Why Don't You Love Me, happened. So I'll be here waiting patiently. Yes, I'll be here every day. Oh, I'll be here no matter what you say. 'Cause when I look at you, the ice all melts away. 'Cause I know that I love you. I know that you need me every day. It's love, not me, you're pushing away. I'm right here to hold you and say, everything will turn out okay. Okay. Okay.
That's a beautiful, beautiful ending to that song. And I absolutely love the inspiration that led to that song, or the ending of that song, that you didn't receive him to fix him. God gave him to you to love. I've had, not in that exact way, but I've received that answer as well with my children, who, for me, it was more like I was feeling guilty, like I'd made too many mistakes and it was my fault they were the way they were. And God gave me a similar answer, but your answer is so So beautiful and so true for all of us.
Well, and that's what led to, it was during this time when he was in treatment. He ended up having to do some treatment after he was arrested, and he said, I don't want to be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints anymore. Like, I don't want to do that. And because I had had this experience where I realized I was just supposed to meet him where he was at, I just said, okay, what do you want to be? Like, what do you want to do? I want you to know that there's many ways to worship God, but a life without God, that's a life I don't wish for you. So he would have these days off that I could go pick him up and we could go spend time together. We started going to churches. So I took him to a couple different, like a Catholic service and a Pentecostal service and different services. We ended up at the Rock Church, which is a church up in Draper. And that was the one he liked the most. Live band, right? It was
Hmm.
awesome. And he connected, but for the first time, he was listening to those preachers. And he was actually taking notes sometimes. And he would come out after and we would discuss what they'd talked about. And though many of the principles were the same principles he'd learned at our church that we'd grown up going to, the way it was presented was different enough that he was more receptive. And I recognized this light that was happening in him from not feeling forced, from feeling like it was his choice to make, and that his relationship with God had nothing to do with me. It was his own. And so now this young boy is 23 now. He's all grown up. And we have an amazing relationship. And he's been through a lot of really hard things. But his relationship with God is incredible. And how often he turns to God. It's different than mine. He doesn't go to the same church as I do. He doesn't even go to a regular church. But he knows he has a Father in heaven.
Which is huge, really. And I'm so impressed that you were willing to not only let him try other churches, but you went with him. That's amazing. I feel that a lot of us have so much fear that they're not going to make the right choice. They're not going to stay in what we think is the right church. And so because of fear, a lot of people would just never be willing to do that. But it was amazing that you took him and went with him to these other churches to help him find a good fit for him and what felt right for him. And look at the beautiful outcome that you've gotten from that. It's just amazing. This is the kind of stuff that I wish that 20 years ago I would have known.
Well, and realizing part of the reason I think I was able to do that is I'd had a lot of life experience traveling the world. I lived in Israel. I went to the Jerusalem Center when I was in college, and so I had Muslim teachers, I had Jewish teachers. I realized how strong other people have testimonies of their religions. And I had a Muslim professor, I will never forget this moment because it changed my view of all religions. He was talking about Muhammad flying on the winged animal Barak to Mecca, that story that they tell. And some people in my class started to snicker and laugh. And he turned around and he looked at us very firmly. And he said, some people would laugh at a religion based on a 14-year-old boy that saw God in the woods. And that hit me really strong. Because as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I took for granted the story I'd been taught from childhood of Joseph Smith in the Sacred Grove. And I would have never wondered why someone would question that. And I realized that his story that he had been taught and brought on meant just as much to him as my story meant to me. And who was I to judge? And from that time, I looked at anybody's religion, anybody who had conviction. If we look at Mother Teresa or Gandhi or all these people who had conviction with their beliefs to do good in the world and bring people to light, who am I to judge? And so I think because of that, when he said, I don't want to belong to this church, the question wasn't for me of, oh no, what am I going to do? You're going to be damned. Instead, it was okay, then how are you going to find God? Because I know you need God.
And I think it's really interesting that you'd had all those experiences with those other churches ahead of time, almost like you were perfectly prepared to be his mother and to take him, because I don't think, honestly, most of us would think to do that. But you did because of the experience that God had prepared you with to then help you to help him. I think it sounds miraculous that he has such a great relationship with God because so many children don't. I feel like a lot of kids these days will be like, well, I don't want to go to this church, therefore I'm not going to go to church. There's other options out there. And I also have a son who has found the Rock Church and really likes it. And I'm so grateful that he's willing to go to any church,
Mm-hmm.
because I also have kids who question whether there even is a God. And so it's a great blessing to have a child that believes and has a relationship with God in any capacity.
Definitely. And that's the fostering of that, right? And the hope. Because even those who have maybe lost faith in God at this point, there's always the hope that you can continue to testify with your testimony that you know that there's someone there, that they do have a heavenly Father, and that in time they'll come back to that knowledge.
Absolutely. Are there any other insights or anything else you would like to share with us?
One of my passions is to speak and to sing my songs for different people. So if at any point anyone is interested in having me come and sing or speak for your church or a group or a book club or anybody, that's something I love to do. And I do about an hour long presentation with multiple songs and my stories of overcoming hard things
That
and
sounds
then
wonderful.
moving through them. You can find me on my website, KristyHunter.com, and I am just so grateful I got to be here.
I have quite a few links for Kristy, and I'm going to put all of those in the show notes so that you have a way to connect with her. She's got her music on Amazon and all kinds of really cool ways that you can connect with Kristy. Kristy, will you share with us one last song?
Yes, I often end most of my speaking engagements with a song called Power Within. And I wrote this specifically because I believe every person has the power inside of themselves to achieve amazing things. And it's just believing in ourselves. So it goes like this. Because you are unique in this universe. You're the only you that's ever been. Let me help you believe you're worthy enough and know that you will win. You have the power within.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that and for being here today, for being willing to share and be vulnerable and really share your story in a way that was eye-opening for me and hopefully for our listeners.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
And for my listeners, thank you for being here. And please join me again next time for another episode of Just Love Them.